Thank you.
I believe you're going.
I think you're right.
I might forget to give it to him. Is he supposed to give you money?
Okay.
Oh, 1,005.
Are y'all's eyes red?
$1,000.
What is this?
And Laura's sending you a bill. She said you can't read it till later.
Oh. Let's just let it there. That's confusing. I'm
Is that
easily distracted.
Are you
Oh, that's so
confused
nice.
now?
Okay, here we go. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
You shall be holy, for I, Yehovah, your God, am holy. Right?
Yep.
So what was last week's Torah portion? Akrimot. Right?
After he died.
Hmm?
After the death.
After the death. Right. This week's portion continues with the theme of purity, begins with the Lord saying to the Israelites, you must be holy because I, Yahweh, your God. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Good morning.
It's a lie.
See,
I know the feeling.
all right. Here are footsteps. Yes, y'all, tell you what, y'all just got here under the wire.
I know, right? We're getting there. One of these days we might get here at 9.
That's right.
Got a full house.
9:05 is the new 9.
It's the new name.
Okay, y'all haven't seen this, so I'm showing it now. Now, I don't know, can y'all read that from way back there? You can? Okay, well, I've changed this up just a teeny bit. I put the Hebrew transliteration in blue so you can distinguish it from the English part. Okay?
Okay.
Okay,
I probably wouldn't have done
I was going to say, I don't know that I could have made it without that.
I thought I was doing you a favor.
You were.
I'm tired.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Now, next week.
It's kind of like
No,
this.
look,
Can you go like
Rob's
this? You
gonna
say
take a
L out
picture.
there. God put that there for you.
I know. Water seeks its level. I understand. Good morning. Okay, so we're gonna say it in English first, which is the third line, and then we'll say it in Hebrew,
The second line.
which is the second line.
Just in case you don't.
Well, I thought the first one
Recognize
was
it.
Hebrew.
Okay, I'm talking about the transliteration that you can read.
Oh, okay.
But you can read the Hebrew.
We'll say it on the first line, but it's going to sound a lot like the second.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. We are going to murder it, but it's okay. We're
Texas.
not fluent in.
We're Texans.
We're Texans.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah, sounds good out of Texas, doesn't it?
Okay. All right. Now, it's going to underline the words as we go through the Hebrew words.
It's not going to circle.
Not going to circle.
Forward and backward anymore.
It's not going to do the circling.
Wow.
It's going to do the underlining.
Wow.
So, join me.
Okay.
Oh, hang on.
Wait.
I forgot to say one other thing.
Hurry up.
Down the very bottom line where it says, has sanctified us in his commandments. My old one said by his commandments. This one says in his commandments. Okay, so it's a little bit different. So if you're memorized what we say, it's going to be a little bit different. Okay, so join. Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzavanu la'asot b'divrei Torah.
I did
Oh.
too.
I can't even do what I tell people to do.
You
Well, let's say it in
said
English.
The third line.
Let's say it in English. Blessed is our God, King of the universe, who sanctified us in his commandments and commanded us to engross ourselves in the words of the Torah. All right. I made it through that.
See, you
Just
set us
barely.
up. You
Yeah.
said we were
I
going to mess it
know,
up,
I
and so we
know.
did.
Don't rub it in. Come on.
We messed it
Yes.
up good though.
We
Change can be kinda hard sometimes.
Yeah.
Change can be hard.
Hey, if you're gonna do something, do it good.
So, next week we'll be prepared.
Next week, yes. Next week we'll fumble our
So
way
don't
through one more
change
time.
anything between now and then.
Don't change anything?
No.
Change is harder than paper money anyway.
Okay.
Oh, Mom. That phone just, I wasn't ready.
Throw it at people.
All right. Here we go. Parsha Kedoshim begins with a demand for Israel to be holy. The Holy One of Israel. How do you say the Holy One of Israel? Kadosh Israel. Why is it important to be holy?
Because he is holy.
Because He is holy.
And if we're following him, then we need to follow him in every aspect.
Uh-huh.
Not just
He said,
what we want
be
to follow
holy.
him in.
He said, "Be holy."
Because God said so, keynote speaker.
Keynote. Y'all understand why He's saying keynote speaker?
Can we put him in the corner?
Hmm?
Oh, I was wondering if we could put him in the corner.
No.
He
Well, he
is in the
sorta
corner.
is.
He is kind of in.
I know my place.
No, we
Kinda.
don't know why he's saying keynote speaker.
But
Because
I did it. This here keeps me from having to stick my nose in there. So.
okay, because I'm using a Mac and it has PowerPoint, but the Apple version of that is called Keynote, and I use Keynote.
So you are the speaker.
I'm the keynote speaker.
I thought he was saying that because God is
That's pretty
always.
funny.
Pretty
Well,
funny.
I thought it was because God is always the keynote speaker.
Somehow
He's
when it
speaking.
has to have an explanation, it kind of,
Okay. In Proverbs 15:8, when it says the sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination to Yahweh, but the prayer of the upright is acceptable to Him, what's that talking about? When it says the sacrifice of the wicked.
The fruit of his lips.
Means
Okay.
if you're unholy, then the stuff that you do is unholy.
That's right. It's saying if you
No matter
don't
what
keep
you
my
say.
commandments, then you're not holy.
If you're
Okay.
just a weekend kind of guy.
Yeah. If you're just a Sunday Christian,
Backyard Christian.
here we are on Saturday.
I know, here we
changes
are.
everything.
changes everything. Okay. So
On
we'll
the seventh day, which is complete.
read number 1 here. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to all the congregation of the people of Israel, and say to them, You shall be holy, for I, Yahweh your God, am holy. Every one of you shall revere his mother and his father, and you shall keep my Shabbats. I am Yahweh your God. Do not turn to idols or make for yourselves any gods of cast metal. I am Yahweh your Elohim. When you offer a sacrifice of peace offerings to Yahweh, you shall offer it so that you may be accepted. It shall be eaten the same day you offer it, or on the day after, and anything left over until the third day shall be burned up with fire. If it is eaten at all on the third day, it is tainted. It will not be accepted, and everyone who eats it shall bear his iniquity, because he has profaned what is holy to Yahweh. And that person shall be cut off from his people. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge. Neither shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest, and you shall not strip your vineyard bare. Neither shall you gather the fallen grapes of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner. I am Yahweh your God. You shall not steal, you shall not deal falsely, you shall not lie to one another, and you shall not swear by my name falsely, and so profane the name of your God. I am Yahweh. You shall not oppress your neighbor or rob him. The wages of a hired worker shall not remain with you all night until the morning. You shall not curse the deaf or put a stumbling block before the blind, but you shall fear God. I am Yahweh. So, what is the Hebrew word for holiness?
Kadesh.
Kedushah. From a word that means set apart as sacred. personal holiness is called sanctification and implies a separation from sin and impurity. Believers in Yeshua have what? Do you think we have imputed holiness?
Yes.
We have imputed holiness by a sacrifice that's above all sacrifices, right? So we have imputed holiness by his sacrifice. But so if we're Kodashim, we are the holy ones. So if this portion says the name is Kodashim, then we are the holy ones, right? That's who it's directed to. And who are the holy ones?
The ones who obey.
Hmm?
The
Ones who obey. Okay.
The ones bearing the fruits.
Right.
You
So
sure
God
think?
told Moses that the children of Israel must be holy. Why?
Because he's holy.
Because he's holy. In order to be in relationship with a holy God, the people had to be holy themselves, since darkness and light cannot coexist. And God's moral purity and truth are inviolable to his nature. In other words, if you look at the whole picture of the children of Israel in the wilderness, I mean, in the middle is the tabernacle where God resides. And around it is all the priests that stand between God and the people. And then all the people surround it. And on the outside of the camp is all the people that are unclean or have touched a dead body or what, for whatever reason, they're outside the camp. And then, but the closer you get in, the hotter it gets. The closer you get to God, the more, how do you say it? The more your iniquity has to be burned away. I mean,
Almost exactly the opposite with our cities today. The closer you get to the city center, the uglier it gets.
the uglier it gets. That's true. There's an analogy, which what he's alluding to is Brad Scott. On the top of the mountain is the pure water. You've got ice. And as it melts, it goes into the streams, the creeks and streams and so forth, and it gets a little bit polluted, but you can still drink it. And then it gets down into the river, and when it gets in the river, it's a little more polluted, but you can still drink it. But when it runs into the ocean, it's completely corrupt, and if you drink it, you die. And that's the way people are. The more they congregate into corrupt societies, the more they become polluted. And the bigger that area becomes, the more polluted it becomes. Because that's the nature of people. Okay.
Although the analogy with the mountain isn't so much pureness anymore because all the crap they're dumping in our skies.
Okay.
Because what's at the bottom of the mountain? Edward G. Robinson, total chaos.
Okay. When a peace offering was sacrificed, when did it have to be completely eaten?
By the end of the second day.
End of the second day. Or it had to be destroyed, right?
Yep. Burned
Burned.
with fire.
Bad enough.
Okay. You know, there's some sacrifices they could eat on the third day, wasn't there?
Some.
Like a
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving offering or something like that. I don't know. It seems like there was some that were on the third day. Do you think?
I'd have to read.
Somebody research that for me so I can be sure.
Well, Yeshua is the bread, and the bread comes from the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And the Baruch atah Adonai, you know,
Mhm.
bread and so forth.
Hamatzi.
So, we can't eat of the bread of life because he rose on the third day.
Okay. So, when we're reaping the harvest of the land, we are commanded to leave what?
Gleaning.
The gleanings. We're supposed to leave the edges, and we're supposed to leave what's dropped. So, what does that allude to?
taking care of the poor, but not taking care of the poor in such a manner that you humiliate them.
That's right. All through Scripture, it never tells you, except on certain days, to give money to the poor. But there are, a lot of people don't remember, y'all may remember, back when the Air Force Base was in force here, big time, there were airmen all over town. And everything that goes with military was prevalent big time in Amarillo. But downtown, there were blind people and crippled people that sat on the sidewalk and had their cups and sold pencils and stuff like that. They were beggars downtown. Most people today don't know what beggars are. I mean, we see homeless people, and there's some people standing at the corners with signs and stuff. But back in the day, there were poor people that were beggars and stuff, and it was, there was a stigma. Nobody wanted to be on the government dole. That was shame. People wanted jobs. I mean, even the blind people and crippled people were selling pencils. They didn't want to be called a beggar, And churches and stuff like that's what helped people, And if people didn't want to be helped, if they wouldn't willing to work, if they just wanted a handout, they suffered the consequences. Unlike today, there's no penalty for being a deadbeat.
Nope. In fact, it's rewarded.
Yeah, they want to give you money, especially if you're not even a citizen.
I know.
Okay. So when are the wages to be paid to a hired worker?
Every day.
By the end of the day. Now I don't understand that. Do you have understanding of that?
I don't understand what the application before the end of the day is. When I was thinking about this, I tied it more to shall not muzzle the ox.
That was part of the teaching of Rabbi Zav on the Israel guys. And he says because poor people, they may need that day to eat or to feed their family. And so to withhold it until even the next day is a threat to their life. So
Or a hardship.
There's
Yeah.
a
Hardship.
commandment, there's
Yeah.
also a commandment that the wages of the worker not to remain with you overnight.
Yeah.
I think it's the same.
That's what it's talking about.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
So
Now we have to wait 2 weeks,
Or a
1 week or
month.
2 weeks
Oh,
or
yeah.
a month.
A week is long enough.
But, and his explanation is that there's an agreement between the wage payer and the wage receiver. If they agree to that, then that's okay.
Yeah.
So
Well,
even
we don't
then,
have a choice.
they can agree to do it like once a week or something.
So,
We don't have a choice anymore.
People
Hey,
work
and
for
you-
me.
But you
that-
agree
you
to
either
that
take
when
either-
you accept that
As we go.
employment.
Yeah, you either
Because-
take that or
because
you don't work.
They don't
So-
talk about it anymore, though.
Sweet.
Well, but that's,
It's-
like
we're
Ron
gonna
said,
pay
that's
you
in,
For that job, yeah.
We're gonna pay you this way, and that's unless you don't want the job, you have to
well,
obey.
that's an agreement, cause you agree to.
okay, I didn't mean to open this
You
can of
did.
worms. Okay. So
Is it
what's
a can
the
of worms or a can of monkeys?
okay? Okay. What principle is implied by the related commandments not to curse a deaf person or put a stumbling block in front of a blind person? What's that talking about?
Because you injure them either way. If you use your tongue, you injure them, and potentially even harsher than actually causing somebody who doesn't see you.
Isn't that overall more about just not taking advantage of people?
Okay, so you can say that we should never be cruel to others, especially the disabled, the blind, the crippled, stuff like that. That's one thing. But what about they have eyes to see and ears to hear?
Spiritual.
Spiritual. I mean, there's a spiritual application here. Is you don't put a stumbling block between people that are trying
And truth.
to become followers of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're trying to be in the fight. Okay? They don't know how, but if you put a stumbling block, like you haven't been circumcised, so get out. They don't have eyes to hear, or eyes to see, ears to hear. Especially when you treat them, what's that term?
Lashon hara.
Well, what's that?
Evil word.
No. The letter of the law, like the spirit of the law.
Oh, yes.
You didn't wear your
Legalism.
best tunic to service today, so you have to leave.
So it's kind of like cursing someone under your breath. You know, just because they didn't hear it doesn't mean it didn't destroy you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Or send some kind of.
but God heard it.
God heard it. I mean, people's. It's like this past week's reading, we read about Hannah, Samuel's mother. Okay, she was praying silently, but her lips were moving. And Eli, the high priest, he thought she was drunk.
Yep.
But God was hearing her prayer. She wasn't. It wasn't loud. It wasn't. But He hears our prayers, no matter what. Okay. Number 2. Okay. You shall do no injustice in court. You shall not be partial to the poor, nor defer to the great. But in righteousness you shall judge your neighbor. You shall not go around as a slanderer among your people, and you shall not stand up against the life of your neighbor. I am Yahweh. You shall not hate your brother in your heart, but you shall reason frankly with your neighbor, lest you incur sin because of him. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahweh. You shall keep my statutes. You shall not let your cattle breed with a different kind. You shall not sow your field with 2 kinds of seed, nor shall you wear a garment of cloth made of 2 kinds of material. If a man lies sexually with a woman who is a slave assigned to another man and not yet ransomed or given her freedom, a distinction shall be made. They shall not be put to death because she was not free, but he shall bring his compensation to Yahweh to the entrance of the tent of meeting, a ram for a guilt offering. And the priest shall make atonement for him with the ram of the guilt offering before Yahweh for his sin that he has committed, and he shall be forgiven for the sin that he has committed. When you, that's the 3. Okay. Excuse me, pardon me. Is it ever permissible to show partiality to the rich?
No.
Why not?
Well, they kind of get a lot of partiality in life anyway.
Because
I don't know.
God doesn't show partiality to anybody. He reigns on the good, the just, and the unjust.
Okay. So never let, if you say partiality, our society, we really don't have any poor people compared to
other
most
nations.
societies. I mean, if you travel to a country, like if you go south of the border in Texas, you see some real poverty. I mean, the first time I made the trip across the border, you're going 100 yards, and you go from a clean little town into like turmoil. But I don't know what. I went to Israel, but Israel's like being here. So, you've been some of those places, haven't you? You've been some.
Never been to Mexico.
I don't know, I've been to East Denver.
Oh, you
There's
guys have
people
been
that need food.
right in the armpit.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm kind of thinking that being partial to the rich, if you do things for the rich, most of the thing is if you be nice to them, they'll be nice to you. So if you're being nice to the rich, it's anticipation of getting something back. Or if you be nice to the poor, you're not getting anything back. So that it's more of what your part does. So I'm doing this because for me, not for the person.
Right.
Proverbs warns you to be poor if you do that. Give
Right.
gifts to kings.
the spiritual application is that when we help others that are in need, it blesses God. In other words, He says, that's what I do for you. I give you life. I forgive you. And so when we act in a forgiving, inclusive manner, then that is an attribute of God. That's being gracious.
It's being loving.
Loving, yeah. So now we get to the point, what is Lashon Hara?
Evil tongue.
Evil speech, gossip, slander, and so on. See, I used to do that. That was my mainstay of life, was being sarcastic about things. I mean, I've said this before, one of my favorite old sayings was, I was born ignorant and been losing ground ever since. That's cursing yourself. I mean, when you say things like that, you shouldn't say that. I mean, anything that doesn't build up tears down. So what, in that context, what's meant by the commandment, you shall surely rebuke your neighbor and not bear sin because of him?
That means another believer, right?
Mm-hmm. Your neighbor. Well, people are confused about neighbors. We read, was it 19:18, where it said, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." We're going to read in a little while 19:33, which says, "The foreigner and the sojourner among you, you shall not, because you were a slave in Egypt, you shall not mistreat them. You shall love them as yourself also." So God's not talking about your next door neighbor. He's talking about people. Everybody's a neighbor.
But it changes with the word rebuke, right?
Well,
because you wouldn't rebuke someone who didn't understand to begin with and then be responsible for their sin.
okay. You wouldn't rebuke someone that doesn't know.
Right.
But you would speak truth to him. In other words, we don't eat that because God said that's not food.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you'd explain to them why you do what you do. So now, if you want to do that, that's okay. If you want to live that way, but there is a God in heaven, and He has commandments, and we're supposed to be a light to you. And if I don't tell you, then that's my fault, because that's what Israel was to be a light. And if you're a light, what are you doing? You're putting
Showing
out
the
the
way.
truth. Okay.
I guess I think of rebuke as stronger than that.
Well,
That is more like instruction,
mhm.
whereas rebuke,
Yeah.
to me is
Well,
some stronger word.
There's in the Psalms and so forth, there's where it says your enemy in the gate. But people say your enemy. They're looking at, let's put on our guns and go to war. Okay, there's a distinguishing thing that goes on in the scripture. And your enemy in the gate is talking about people that stand against your principles. Okay, so if you live in a society where there's people that don't believe like you do, that's your enemy in the gate. You're supposed to confront that. Okay, your enemy that's going to invade your country, that's a whole different thing. You have a standing army that protects your borders. I mean, that's why we have borders and so forth. That's why countries exist. That's different. That's not your enemy in the gate. Your enemy in the gate is someone you contend with for the rules of your society. Okay?
I mean, there's people in America that don't have America's best interests in mind.
That's a rumor. I don't know if you should be spreading that or not.
I never
I'm
would have
just
thought.
looking at the fruits of the border.
Well, But evil,
What used to be a poor
evil speech, slander, and those type things that happen, those are connected with the breakdown of society. Gossip and slander and things like those things divide. And the statements show words mean things. They destroy. They build up. And so we are called not to destroy, but to build up.
Ephesians says in edify.
Right.
But on the stumbling block, the Greek word for that is scandalon, which is where you get our word scandal.
Mm-hmm.
So when we put a stumbling block in front of a person, this really isn't dealing with an actual block in front of a blind person, but it's representing, even with Lashon Hara, it's a stumbling block for us to be scandalizing somebody else.
Right. Well, the Hebrew concept are that in those terms, when you embarrass someone, it's like you murdered them. I mean, their face turns red. You know, it's like they've lost blood. So, doing those things, when you embarrass people, say things bad about them, so forth, even if it's true, you're not giving them the benefit of the doubt that they're changing. You know, it's like person X has been in prison, but he's been out of prison for some years and he's a productive member of society. And then someone comes in new and says, "Oh, this is Bill. He's our ex-convict that's part of our class now." Well, you know that. What does that have to do with anything? You know, if Bill wants to tell his past story, he can, but let him do it. It's not your job to identify his faults or things that's happened to him. That's murdering him right in front of people. So, so you shall surely rebuke your neighbor and not bear sin because of him. It means that if your neighbor is doing stuff that's not right, you need to not in public, but you need to go to him and rebuke him. You need to say, "Hey, let's don't do that." That's what we need to do. Okay, we're ready for number 3, right? Do I have a volunteer for number 3?
When you come into the land and plant any kind of tree for food, then you shall regard its fruit as forbidden. 3 years it shall be forbidden to you, it must not be eaten. And in the 4th year all its fruit shall be holy, an offering of praise to Yahweh. But in the 5th year you may eat of its fruit, to increase its yield for you, for I am Yahweh your God. You shall not eat any flesh with the blood in it. You shall not interpret omens or tell fortunes. You shall not round off the hair on your temples or mar the edges of your beard. You shall not make any cuts on your body for the dead or tattoo yourselves. I am Yahweh. Do not profane your daughter by making her a prostitute, lest the land fall into prostitution and the land become full of depravity. You shall keep my Sabbaths and reverence my sanctuary. I am Yahweh. Do not turn to mediums or necromancers. Do not seek them out, and so make yourselves unclean by them. I am Yahweh your God. You shall stand up before the gray head and honor the face of an old man, and you shall fear your God. I am Yahweh.
Thank you. So, we are to fear Yahweh, our parents, but a parent tells a child, can a parent tell a child to sin?
Yeah.
Is the child supposed to do it?
No.
No. So, I've often wondered about honoring your parents. A preacher used to know. He said that you only had to honor your parents if your parents were honorable.
That's kind of subjective sometimes.
That sounds a lot like they were teaching back in the day. Yeshua came into that. Ain't how that worked.
Well, there is some merit to it, but you have to keep in mind you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for your parents. You know, and so there's some honor due your parents. But if your parents do dishonorable things, are we not supposed to address it with them?
You gotta try to, but
Try to. But that's a hard thing to do. I mean, it's difficult to address things to someone that supposedly is your superior. And your parents have to be in that position, but they have to have a moral position. If you don't come thing from God's standpoint, which I say is the high ground, then you're doomed.
Well, in Achan's case, he hid the forbidden treasure in the ground under his tent, and the whole family went down with him because either they weren't allowed to speak against him or they agreed with it and wanted it for themselves too. So there is a situation when somebody, because they all knew what the rule was. You don't take
Well,
stuff.
but the story is the salient point of the story is it says he called out the tribes and the tribe of Judah was chosen. He chose and it goes down and at every point he had a chance to repent.
like a circle, and he targeted.
Right.
As did all the people in his family that knew about it.
Right. And so he didn't do it in a vacuum, is what it's getting at. And God is saying, okay, you had a chance here, called out. That's our tribe. They know it. We're in here somewhere. And then they started by clan, and his clan was called out. And then his clan, then his family is chosen. So he had like 4 chances to say, okay, but no. He was called out, and he said, yeah, I got it in my tent.
Kind of like, here's the book of Moses. No. Here's the prophets. No. Here's Messiah. No. Here's Revelation. I think you might want to wake up before we get there.
Well,
That's
Yeshua
right.
even spoke in a general way to Judas. Judas had chances too, also, to repent of what he was about to do, and he wouldn't. He didn't do it.
Right. He was sorry, but he wasn't repentant.
Exactly, it's the difference.
Sorry, got caught.
yeah, definitely.
Now, this is one that I didn't know whether to ask or not, but what kind of tattoos does the Torah permit?
For the dead, or some people say any kind.
Yeah, none. I mean, it doesn't say you can tattoo yourself. It just says, but in context where it says trimming your beard and doing these things, it's in context with the dead. And people did that for the dead. In other words, mom died, so I had mom tattooed on my arm. Nah, don't do that.
When they were in sorrow, they would grab a hold of their beard and tear it out.
Rip it out.
Well, is it connected? You shall not eat any flesh with blood, and you shall not interpret omens or tell fortunes. That doesn't have anything to do with the dead. You don't do that anyway. So, the rounding off the hair of the temples or the edges of the beard, how is that connected with the dead? How, or in other words,
Because that's
why?
what it's followed by. It says, you shall not do anything because of the dead.
Oh, because I would have figured the dead would have been first. Don't do the tattoos of the dead, and then don't cut off the hair of your. So
Yeah,
it's just a different way of stating.
Right.
That was some behavior of the pagan
Yeah, the
people
pagan.
around them.
But in reality,
honoring the dead.
anything associated with death is not good, because God is the God of life, and death is an abomination to Him. In other words, the whole reason for salvation is to restore life. And so if you're honoring the dead with tattoos and stuff, he said, don't do that. He said, I take care of the dead. I redeem. I raise up. Not you. You are to avoid that.
Have you ever looked up the word, or I was looking into that, trying to figure that out a year or two ago, and stumbled across pagan bowl cut. So they apparently used to have a bowl cut in it. And it's not,
Shave their
it's
heads.
not so much the haircut itself, it's, this haircut is being used to associate and say that I am with this God. This is the God that I worship because that's how I do my hair.
The
There's a lot of people who condemn tattoos while shaving their beard at the same time, and they're both forbidden, so.
Shaving your beard's not forbidden.
Harming the corners of your, I'm sorry, Rob, I wasn't trying to.
But that's why it's not, whenever you go get into the Hebrew, then that's, I don't think that shaving your beard is forbidden. Otherwise, how do you have the Nazarite vow? Because you're supposed to shave your whole body.
True, well, that's
So,
And then
so
like
in
growth.
context, I
I
don't
see.
think it's shaving your beard. I think it's,
harming.
I think it's the
Oh, like.
the
we're-
thing that they were doing was in their sadness and in there to show that they were sad, they would tear the beard out and mark. That's gonna cause all kinds of
And the
marking
priests
and
of
tearing
Baal
up
would
your
say
body,
that
the
it's-
same as a tattoo.
You know, the side walls and the
But the,
weird satanic areas.
yeah.
Okay.
What also freaked me out that
More
came
words.
up in that
I'm trying to get it back.
was the tonsure.
I'll leave it. I'm sorry,
The
what?
tonsure,
Like, is that the Catholic
the
thing?
monk, yeah.
Yeah.
Like all of the
Because there's
prophets.
another word,
Yeah.
we'll hit at some point, another word says don't shave a circle in your head either, and that's,
yeah.
That's,
again, part of it.
Okay, moving right along.
Romans 3:23.
It's scary.
Okay, what does the oft repeated phrase "I am Yahweh" appear after many commandments? Why is he doing that? But every sentence you read just now says I am Yahweh.
Because he has to remind us because we're thick-skulled and hard-headed
Like I see
and
it.
stiff-necked.
And with varying hairstyles.
Yeah.
Because he is God and this is his word and he's sovereign. Period.
Okay.
Yeah.
End of
Distinguishing
discussion.
himself from the other gods.
Well,
Driving home,
that-
be holy for I am holy.
well, all those are correct, but the main point is to remind us that nothing is hidden from God. Nothing. I mean, Achan, who you just mentioned, nothing was hidden from him. Okay, even though he buried it in the middle of his tent under everything, you know. So God is telling us, "Hey, I'm God. Wake up."
You can't go to the ditch.
You know, that's what's going. And if we remember that, then what happens? If we remember who God is,
then we try to
Beginning
obey and be
wisdom
like
here.
him.
begin in wisdom, and we perform the mitzvah. We keep His commandments.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's not. You can, in your general life, things happen, and you naturally keep commandments. I mean, you stand up when the elderly come into the room. You open the door, or you help someone across the street, or
You stop at stop sign.
you stop at stop signs. You don't speed.
Hopefully.
I mean, you do the things. I mean, you naturally do those things because you're remembering who God is. And if you don't remember who He is, then how are you going to remember what you're supposed to do? So at every point, He says, "I am Yahweh." Remember that. You know, but we leave the premises here and we all forget.
Like we look in a mirror and then walk away and forget what we look like.
What we look like. That's the same principle.
It's like what David said.
Because it is a
He said-
shadow of things to come.
He said, if I make my bed in hell, you are there. If I ascend into heaven, you are there.
You're there. Explain the laws about harvesting fruit trees in Israel.
I have
Don't leave, you mean like leave a little bit for the poor?
No.
First 3
Oh,
years.
about 3 years thing?
4 years.
Yeah.
Well,
You can either
Well, that
for
1
3
year,
years,
it's
yeah.
it's an offering.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
You know some other interesting stuff? Fruit trees tend to not even bring forth fruit until about the 5th year.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
I had a pastor that was sick upon me. He said, "You eat 2-year-old fruit without even thinking about it." And
Hold on, what?
that's not true, but you know, here's an amazing thing. It really doesn't happen. The only ones that happens is the ones that have been genetically modified.
Mm-hmm.
Just leave fruit.
It's a ritual.
I'll behave from here on out.
Yeah. The fourth year, all the fruit was considered for God. In other words, the fourth year was, if it produced in that year, it was for Him. Your point is it didn't produce much fruit at all in the first 3 years, and then the fourth year, where it's actually coming out, is entering maturity.
Right.
That's the first fruits that's given to Him. So the first fruits, which is in the fourth year, is His, and then after that, it's yours. So what it's doing, what God is telling you is trees are like people. They have to mature before they can produce fruit. And that fruit's mine. So that's the basis for the bar mitzvah and the bat mitzvah, is because the person has matured and they're ready to produce fruit. And what happens in those, in a bar mitzvah and a bat mitzvah? They take the yoke of the Torah. In other words, in Judaism, it's considered a yoke, a burden. But in God's eyes, it's considered freedom. See how it's confused?
Mm-hmm.
You know, just like now, I mean, you go to Israel and if you're keeping the commandments, they ask you why. You don't have to. You're not one of us. We have the burden of the Torah, not you. And you have to, I mean, and the proper comeback is the Torah isn't a burden. It's a gift. It's light. It's truth. I mean, that's what we're supposed to do. It's given in
Yeshua said
love.
it was a light yoke.
Yeah, it was given in love, not in as a burden. So hard to do that.
It's for blessings and curses you choose.
Right.
That's why Yeshua said, "Take my burden upon you, because it is light."
So, what words teach us to give honor to old people? Y'all know what those words are?
Rise before the gray-headed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The Hebrew is Mipnei Sava Takum. You must stand up in the presence of the aged and honor the face of the old man. This principle is also used to show honor to the Torah sage, regardless of his or her age. In other words, what it's saying is that when God's talking about the gray head, He's not talking about people that have gray hair. He's talking about people that have lived by His word and have
Matured.
not matured. They are able to explain it in a reasonable way. Wisdom. So what he's talking about is you honor someone that has honored me with their life, and those are the old people that have lived a proper life. I mean, and you know people like that. I mean, I always use the
How do you do that on Shema?
Shema.
You listen.
Well, the thing about it is that my whole life, even up to this day, it's hard for me to see the commandments in this. I mean, it's just doing this study that it comes to light that God wants us to honor people that have honored Him, and those people that are gray-headed and are still doing that wasn't something they learned yesterday. That's something they've applied over and over. You know, that's the Darrell and Devries, the John Stalders that goes by Rick, the Gary Marnies. Those are the people that are the gray-headed people that we honor because they have lived that life. You know, you understand what I mean. Yeah.
Just, to interrupt, when I was transferred Taiwan, the Taiwanese, the people there, I was starting to get a little gray hair in the temples at that time. Still had, top. But that was brought out because they looked at people with gray hair. Gave you.
Yeah. Well,
I
there's
thought it, at the time we kind of laughed at it, but you understand.
Yeah.
And when I went to the Taiwanese post office, the men would shove me aside in order to get their stamps in their mail, and I was fussing about it to one of the missionaries, and they said, Laura, you don't have gray hair. They don't honor that. They honor people who are gray-headed. They honor them.
Yeah. Well.
So that's why I use a ball.
Yeah. Well, the thing about it is that in a lot of societies, especially prior to the modern age, people didn't live a long time, and a lot of people died before they had gray hair.
Yeah, and if you start getting gray hair, you're viewed as having wisdom in life, and that's what they looked at. Well, he's getting some gray hair, so he knows what he might be talking about. You can fool him one way or another. But
So, the second greatest commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself. Why is that one so hard?
We don't know how to love ourselves.
because the definition of neighbor start with,
Uh-huh.
when you see, quote, your neighbor being
Next
So-
door.
if it's next door, but if it's, that one out there,
Mhm.
and practicing evil and doing all this, and it's difficult to put yourself, in the fact that God loves him, he made him, he loves him, but he wants him to, return to him. And it's our part to witness to them, to get them to understand his love for them.
Yeah. Well-
Sometimes I wonder if it isn't easier to love the neighbor who's out there and whatever. But the neighbor that lives next door to you can sure rub you the wrong way, and probably the loving them for some people would really be hard because that neighbor is very obnoxious.
We're
or-
close.
I think the difficulty in loving a neighbor is because we all want the stuff, and they're a competition, and that starts out even with little kids fighting over marbles. They want the stuff.
We need to move on because I've looked up and now we're out of time. So number 4. When a stranger sojourns with you in your land, you shall not do him wrong. You shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as the native among you, and you shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am Yahweh your God. That's the part that Yeshua was talking about. He wasn't talking about your neighbor in Israel. He was talking about your neighbor, the sojourner that comes in. That's the Samaritan. You shall do no wrong in judgment, in measures of length, or weight, or quality, or quantity. You shall have just balances, just weights, a just ephah, and a just hin. I am Yahweh your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, and you shall observe my statutes and all my rules, and do them. I am Yahweh. Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, Say to the people of Israel, any one of the people of Israel, or of the strangers who sojourn in Israel, who gives any of his children to Molech, shall surely be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones. I myself will set my face against that man, and will cut him off from among his people, because he has given one of his children to Molech, to make my sanctuary unclean, and to profane my holy name. If the people of the land do at all close their eyes to that man when he gives one of his children to Molech, and do not put him to death, then I will set my face against that man and against his clan, and will cut them off from among their people, him and all who follow him in whoring after Molech. If a person turns to mediums and romancers, whoring after them, I will set my face against that person and will cut him off from among his people. Consecrate yourselves, therefore, and be holy, for I am Yahweh your God. So, now this is a generic term. I don't mean to say it this way, but this is just generic. Is a Jew allowed to treat a stranger like an outsider who is unwelcome? And I mean, when I say Jew, I mean an Israelite. That's my generic term. People don't understand that. I know that Jews are from Judah, so just to keep him satisfied.
Say Hebrew. Say Hebrew.
See Hebrew, yeah. But I mean, most people, you know.
How about a believer?
I think you have to define the
Believer.
outsider.
Okay. Hmm?
I think you have to define the outsider.
A foreigner, a stranger, someone you
Generally,
don't
no.
know. Yeah.
But they,
Well, generally, it's like it was in Peter's day. Jewish people don't go into a Gentile's house. They don't speak to you when they pass you on the street.
They don't invite you to their house.
Was it a guy that was in our old Sunday school class? What were their names, Zoe? Their front names. She worked at she's an accountant and worked for the city of Amarillo. You know what her?
About 50 people in that class.
No.
You'd have to give a little more information.
No, she was a CPA, worked for the city of Amarillo. Her name started with Alma. What was her husband's front name?
Jack.
Yeah, Jack and Alma. Yeah, Jack and Alma. He was in the army and they were stationed in New York, and they rented an apartment from some a Jewish man who was very conservative. And he said he would come to our house and collect the rent and speak to us. But if we met him on the street, he didn't know us. He said, that really torqued me.
not house.
That was the love thy neighbors thing, you know?
Yeah. Is it always wrong to judge others?
You judge their fruits,
Well, the
Just mentioned
The judge not lest
but
you
not
be
them.
judged.
no, the salient point in there when you're reading it says you must judge with righteous judgment.
Oh, that,
In other words, what is righteous judgment? What's it talking about? The Torah. In other words, it said don't judge people, but if they don't know the Torah, teach them so that they will know it, and then judge them. Okay? I mean, you don't. If someone's not eating clean and they're in your country, you explain to them, you're bringing them in. You're being a light, not a judge. You know. Now, once they're there and they understand, then they will adapt. I mean, the people in Jesus' day, like the centurion and the people that were foreigners, that were like when Peter was sent, those people had learned from the Jewish people what obedience was. Okay? And God was saying, bring those people in. They have caught onto your coattail. So,
1 Corinthians 2:15 or 2:14 and 15.
mhm.
Now the natural person does not receive the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness to him, and he cannot understand them because they are spiritually discerned. But he who is spiritual discerns all things, and he himself is judged by no one. For who has known the mind of the Lord, who will instruct him? We have the mind of Christ.
Right. So it means we are to judge fairly without partiality, but while using a good eye. What's the good eye?
generous,
Generous. And the evil eye?
stingy.
Stingy. In other words, we're to bend over backwards to teach people, not to condemn people. Okay? And you know, it's pretty high-handed when we're lost and broken and being healed to break somebody with the commandments of God. That's just the way it is. So, you know, it goes back to that do unto others as you would have them do to you, instead of do unto others before they do it to you. Okay, and number 5. Are we at number 5? Okay. Where's number 5?
Number 6.
Number 6.
We're at number 6. I'm sorry.
Let me read.
Yeah, go ahead.
Keep my statutes and do them. I am Yahweh, who sanctifies you. For anyone who curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. He has cursed his father or his mother. His blood is upon him. If a man commits adultery with the wife of his neighbor, both the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. If a man lies with his father's wife, he has uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them. If a man lies with his daughter-in-law, both of them shall surely be put to death. They have committed perversion. Their blood is upon them. If a man lies with a male as with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them. If a man takes a woman and her mother also, it is depravity. He and they shall be burned with fire, that there may be no depravity among you. If a man lies with an animal, he shall surely be put to death, and you shall kill the animal. If a woman approaches any animal and lies with it, you shall kill the woman and the animal. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them. If a man takes his sister, a daughter of his father, or a daughter of his mother, and sees her nakedness, and she sees his nakedness, it is a disgrace, and they shall cut off in the sight of the children, their people. He has uncovered his sister's nakedness, and he shall bear his iniquity. If a man lies with a woman during her menstrual period and uncovers her nakedness, he has made naked her fountain, and she has uncovered the fountain of her blood. Both of them shall be cut off from amongst their people. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your mother's sister or of your father's sister, for that is to make naked one's relative. They shall bear their iniquity. If a man lies with his uncle's wife, he has uncovered his uncle's nakedness. They shall bear their sin. They shall die childless. If a man takes his brother's wife, it is impurity. He has uncovered his brother's nakedness. They shall be childless. You shall therefore keep all my statutes and all my rules, and to do them, that the land where I am bringing you to live may not vomit you out.
I'm going to go ahead and read number 7. And you shall not walk in the custom of the nation that I am driving out before you, for they did all these things, and therefore I detested them. But I have said to you, you shall inherit their land, and I will give it to you to possess, a land flowing with milk and honey. I am Yahweh your God, who has separated you from the peoples. You shall therefore separate the clean beast from the unclean, and the unclean bird from the clean. You shall not make yourselves detestable by beast or by bird or by anything which the ground crawls, which I have set apart for you to hold unclean. You shall be holy to me, for I, Yahweh, am holy, and have separated you from the peoples, that you should be mine. A man or a woman who is a medium or a necromancer shall surely be put to death. They shall be stoned with stones. Their blood shall be upon them. So, all these concepts are talking about being separate. And it's, it says keeping the Shabbats and understanding the clean and the unclean, the common and the profane. So, what's God trying to teach us in these things?
To be holy, for he is holy. To stay that way so he can come near us, because he would like to be around us. He would like us to want to be around him.
Yeah, all those things are correct. But what does it take for us to eat clean, to do those commandments in our society, to keep the Shabbat, to do the feast, to do the things it calls us to do in our society? What
Just
A large group effort.
Persevere.
And you have to be set apart too.
well, all those things, but the biggest thing it takes is humility, because you have to humble yourself before people, and no matter what they say, you have to say, well, that's okay. Because there's lots of people that will point their finger and say, you are keeping the law, and that's a sin.
It
Thank
takes
you, John
grace
MacArthur.
because it all starts with grace.
Right.
We can't expect to keep any of the law without grace.
Okay. God gives grace, but we have to be humble and accept that grace, and accept it even under persecution. Is what I'm
Yes,
getting.
which leads to repentance, and then
Right.
Not taken for granted.
Anyway, I had a bunch of other stuff to go over, but we didn't have time to go through it. Y'all did notice in the first little section that it repeated the 10 Commandments. Did anybody catch that? Okay,
they must be important.
they must be.
Maybe so.
I
They're
just have,
probably not one of the smallest, or one of the least, that would be called the least if we didn't pay attention to it.
just one question to ask. Our Torah portion reveals that sanctifying time is a practical way we can express holiness and turn away from idolatry. Every one of you shall revere his mother and his father, and guard my Shabbats. Do not turn to vanity or make yourselves any gods. Personal holiness is the key that unifies the various laws listed in the Torah and represents our responsibility to walk out God's commandments. Yahweh. What's that called? Halakha.
Sanctification.
Okay, what's the connection between honoring parents, observing the holidays, and walking in holiness?
You can't have one without the other.
Well, no, they all are tied together by loving God and applying His words in our life. Okay? So, walking in holiness. What is walking in holiness?
Loving God.
Well, it's loving God, but it's
Loving God, loving people.
loving God, loving people. It's looking at God's commandments as a way to relate to people in the world.
Yeah.
In other words, being kind, being respectful, not looking for ways to condemn, but to bring in. You know, that's the hardest thing that there is to do, is to look for ways to relate to lost people,
To not,
even to those that think that they're not lost.
to not read the Bible as a defense lawyer looking for loopholes, nor to read the Bible as a prosecutor looking to accuse everybody, but to turn or shuv and read the Bible as a child seeking our Father's instructions.
That's correct. Okay, so what's my name? Oh, I got to do. I had the half Torah. We were going to read that and do a whole bunch of stuff, but obviously I was confused.
I think Peter right
Challenge
there
for-
says something about be holy for the Lord is holy.
I think
Yes.
it's
Challenge
19 bucks
accepted.
direction pretty good.
Okay, well I've got this Calvin deal going here. It says, today, for show and tell, I brought a tiny marvel of nature, a single snowflake.
Oh, gosh.
Uh-oh.
I think we might all learn a lesson from how this utterly unique and exquisite crystal turns into an ordinary, boring molecule of water, just like every other one when you bring it in the classroom. And now, while the analogy sinks in, I'll be leaving you drips and going outside.
Wow.
That's funny.
Who is it that said, just remember, you're all unique and special individuals, just like everybody else.
Okay. But I've got one more. That's not all.
He did recover.
But
He
wait.
did recover rather well there, when he saw the drift.
A pastor, a priest, and a rabbi walk into a bar.
Oh no.
Man, okay. So y'all all thought that I was going for a joke.
Yeah.
Well, it is a joke.
They didn't learn from the previous.
What did they say when they walked in? Ow!
Oh God.
Don't!
Okay. So now we can say the blessing, and it's the same way, but now
Start with English.
Now, down at the bottom, that last line where it says, it comes in, it says, everlasting life, and then it says, set in our midst. Everlasting life is set in our midst. And we would say, and set everlasting life in our midst. But it's written in the Hebrew vernacular. So it's kind of like Spanish or other languages. You know, you say house big, not big house. Well, that's the way this is written. So it'll sound weird when we're reading it. So let's say it in Hebrew first this time. Again, since it's written that way. And I won't be confused. Okay, join me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan banu Torah Emet v'Yeshua meshekanu b'kai olam netah b'tukenu Baruch atah Adonai notin ha-Torah. Okay, blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us. Who gave us the Torah of truth, Yeshua our Messiah, everlasting life, set up in our midst. Blessed are you, Yahweh, giver of the Torah. Okay, we murdered it again.
I'm used to saying Adonai, not Yahweh.
I know.
Again, if you're gonna mess up.
It's a learning
mess up
experience.
right.
It's gonna keep us on our toes.
And it's good to change things up every once in a while.
Yeah.
You don't learn anything by doing the same thing over and over.
This is yours.
Oh, yeah.
Again, if you're gonna mess up, do it to the
Das
best
ist
of
neu.
your ability.